My name's Michael Fradkin, Dr. Fradkin. I'm also what's called a palliative care physician. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your experience with the resolution care model.
I was raised in a family of law enforcement and military personnel. So I've always had a very military point of view. In 1989, I joined the Army, went in as a 97 Charlie area specialist, and left in 18 Bravo. I was part of the 75th Regiment. Saw some action over in the sands. And quite frankly, it's probably the single incident that has kept me going through this. I'm a father of 2 children. I never knew my father till I was 18. My stepfather was director of respiratory therapy for the West Coast. Hence the reason I grew up here in California.
So Ron, let me ask you this. So how long have you been receiving home-based or community-based palliative care?
April of this year.
And what kind of situation were you in at that time when we got started with you?
According to my doctor, the oncologist here, it was very, very short. When I finally met him, he was talking a matter of days, maybe weeks at the most.
What was going on in terms of your living situation, help or not help? What was happening?
We didn't have really any help until we got here. I was really surprised. As soon as I got to my sister's, I filed for public assistance. That was approved within 3 days. We had food stamps. Nikki from Resolution Care actually has a contact with Social Security. Someone she knows there, she called her. I got Social Security approved in almost 2 weeks. We were in a desperate situation, and quite frankly, Resolution Care actually saved us from that desperate situation. If it hadn't been for Nikki's contact, I might still possibly be waiting for resolution as far as my Social Security.
So you had no income, no safe housing, no safe caregiving.
No, absolutely nothing.
So you came to us because we were already providing services to your family, and then you connected the dots and reached out. I'll also mention that you qualified for our services because you happen to have a Medicaid managed care plan that values this kind of work, and you met eligibility on the basis of all the clinical stuff that you've been dealing with. What's your plan going forward?
Monday, I will be moving to Columbus, Georgia, outside of Fort Benning, to be closer to my son. I don't have any idea how long I have. I do not want to pass this far away from my son. So I'm going to move there, and we'll see what happens.
Are you hoping to connect with a palliative care program there?
I'm hoping so. I'm not sure if there is one. The hospital that I'm targeted for treatment is John Amos Cancer Center. They've already reached out to me, told me that as soon as my Medicaid is approved, they would have me set up and ready to go.
Let's take a step back from the whole medical story now. How do you feel inside of yourself today, right now?
I'm really curious about what is coming. I'm not afraid to pass. I'm just curious of what's on the other side. I'm really hoping it's not just darkness. It's not just blank. The thought of forgetting my son, my daughter, I don't feel that well at all. I would like to be able to say that, I'm still watching over them. I told them I'd never leave them.
What are the things that you would say are most important to you?
To see my son graduate out of AIT, and because when he's in that uniform, he's gonna be a full-grown man. He's not a little boy anymore. I want to see my daughter do something more than what she's doing with her life.
All around the country, in every state, there's a Medicaid program, and in every state, folks that are dealing with serious illness and financial difficulties deserve to have the kind of wraparound care that's made the kind of difference for you. So thanks for contributing.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Alexandra Drain. We are incredibly honored to be here. We love C-TAC. Thank you, C-TAC, for everything that you're doing. Big shout out. So the time we have together here today is sponsored by the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. as part of their investment in supporting caregivers in their journey by really elevating the importance of their efforts, by strengthening their communities and their networks, and supporting those providers who can make that journey more rewarding and ultimately easier to navigate. As part of that mission, Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation has been a supporter of Archangels. Archangels, for those of you who aren't familiar, is really a movement and a platform that is reframing how unpaid caregivers are seen, honored, and supported. And we do that using a combination of data and stories and working in partnership with both public and private platforms. We are also the luckiest in that we get to work very closely with Amber Slichta. She's the Vice President of Programs and Learning at Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. And we love Amber for so many reasons, but a key and long-lasting one is she also introduced us to New York State's Greg Olson, who in turn introduced us to Becky Prevey. We're going to focus our conversation today on a very unique opportunity we've had to support Greg, Becky, and the state of New York overall in their efforts to support unpaid caregivers. Work that, from our perspective, really reflects and builds on the vision of the foundation. Dave Egner, Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation CEO, Amber, and the rest of the team at the foundation have consistently challenged all of us to work together to break down traditional silos and presumptive notions of what change is and how it happens. I'm going to start with you, Greg. You are the director of NYSOFA, New York State Office for the Aging.
Yeah, well, thanks, Alex. And first, it's great to be here with you and Becky from my home state in New York. And also just want to really plug Amber and Ralph Wilson Foundation. They've been great partners. That is how we met. And it's great to be here at C-TAC. So thanks for that. You're absolutely right. Data and metrics matter. And so in order to really make good policy and systems change, you have to start with the data. You have to be able to articulate it so that people can understand sometimes what's fairly complex into bite-sized pieces and how it matters to what they do. Trying to make sure that we're educating businesses. And business I define as government, state level, county level, municipal level, and the private sector, that there are people they work with every day that are dealing with these issues, and it impacts them personally, it impacts their productivity. And we've seen data in the past that it costs businesses $50 billion a year in lost productivity, absenteeism, turnover. The next step is to survey working caregivers. Who are you? How old are you? Male or female? Who are you caregiving for? How many hours? And some of the data that's coming in is not what we would all expect. It's not a 63-year-old woman who's the daughter anymore. Now, of course, that is a huge block, but that's not who it is. Then final stage is to use your caregiver intensity index to allow people anywhere in their cycle from week to week to understand where they are.
Becky, I want to ask you two questions, and you can answer whatever order you want. Can you explain what is a AAA and what are AAAs doing for the caregivers across the state of New York? And then I'm going to come back and ask you to share a personal story.
I just want to mirror Greg's comments and really thank Ralph C. Wilson and C-TAC and you, Alex, for having us. I think this is such an important conversation. As you mentioned, I get the distinct pleasure of representing the 59 AAAs in New York. So what is a AAA? It's known as an Area Agency on Aging, and you see those throughout the country in different mixes and matches. Really what I think is important to know is that a lot of people just assume a AAA, otherwise known as Offices for the Aging, that, we provide home delivered meals. Well, yes, we do, but we provide so many more supports and services in our book of business. And when you talk about caregiving specifically, caregiving gets very, very complex. So in New York State, we have what's called the New York Connects program, which is extremely beneficial from the consumer side. Which means we're in partnership with all of the other state agencies that provide services, whether that be under a Medicaid umbrella, whether that be through Office of Mental Health, Office of Alcohol and Substance Abuse, Office for People with Developmental Disabilities.
So the Caregiver Intensity Index, which, as you guys know, Archangels has spent freaking 20 years building, is a series of 22 questions, takes 2 minutes, it's like a 2-minute quiz or even a therapy session. And it returns a score that sort of validates the level of caregiver intensity that you're having, puts you in the green, yellow, or red, and then tells you, here are the top 2 things driving that intensity, and here are the top 2 things alleviating that intensity. And then it says, And here's where you can go to get support. For example, NY Connects. You made the point, people presume it's a woman, 50s, 60s, caring for her mom. Yes, and then Becky, you made the point, AAA's deliver meals. Yes, and, right? So I think a theme already of our conversation is it's so much broader. It's so much more holistic. The other day, Becky, you were somebody's red phone. Can you just give a second? Because I think sometimes we're in the thick of it as paid caregiver experts. We lose it all when we ourselves are in the red.
Exactly that. It was a late evening phone call from a very good family friend of mine who's actually a social worker in children's services, who had recently lost her dad about a month ago to a massive stroke. She was now the primary caregiver for her mother. Her mother had not taken care of her own medical needs because she was caregiving for the father. Had like a 40-pound weight loss in the last 3 or 4 months, had a lot of difficulty with the primary care physician's office doing any robust testing. Mom was really in a lot of pain. So, my role in that was to walk her through how to get her assessed in an emergency department. And fast forward 24 hours, she was diagnosed with very advanced metastatic lung cancer that had actually traveled to her bones, which is why she was having so much pain. And so what my friend, who is a social worker, needed was me to be her patient advocate and to get her connected with the services and supports that she needed.
Yeah, so I think there's some positives to take out of that. First of all, we're very fortunate to be in New York State. We have a paid family leave program. We have, funding that goes to the health department to support caregivers of Alzheimer's patients and other dementia that gets contracted with our agencies. We invest hundreds of millions of dollars in direct support for caregivers and indirect. We live in a culture where it's not okay to ask for help. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps. We don't plan ahead because we're ageist. This is not something I can do on my own, or Becky can do on her own, or Alex, you, or Amber. Federal government, state government. This is a community problem that requires a community solution, and that's a community organizing opportunity.
So Becky, let's come back for a second to your work, right, with the AAAs and that community focus, that community level of detail.
It was really, really interesting, Alex, and it was an opportunity for the network to come together. And obviously, my entire network has COVID fatigue. And obviously, all of the AAAs are really focused on making sure their customers are served. But what we also found is the majority of AAAs actually employ people who fit exactly into what we're talking about. They're caregivers.
What is so important is that's not a population that is sitting around saying, I'm an unpaid caregiver. Hey, how you doing? Right? Which is part of what the culture change is about. We shouldn't even be using the word caregiver. We should be talking about the tasks and lifting people up. And I was thinking about one of my favorite quotes, statistics are humans with the tears wiped away.
So that's the kind of data that we put behind it. So you value the population, you value the service infrastructure that supports that population by showing the return on investment. And then that leads to an action, which is you don't wait for people to get so sick and frail that they apply for Medicaid, have to spend down, impoverish themselves.
Greg talked about the public-private partnership. Number one, we have to raise awareness. There is a whole host of volunteers and community-based organizations that want to step up and they want to help. But there's not the awareness. People don't self-identify as caregivers. People don't understand that they can ask for help and that there shouldn't be a stigma. But I think the first thing that we're really focused on, and why I'm so excited about, the work we're doing with Archangels and the Ralph C. Wilson Foundation and other partners is, number one, you raise the awareness, you get the data, as Greg spoke to, from an economic lens and perspective, and you encompass this in a holistic care model.
There's a way that you guys are working together that is not happening across the country. And there is a level of impact, level of savings, level of humanity benefit that would be extraordinary if it could be modeled. Share a little bit about what is unique about how you work together. What could others learn from that?
The issue, frankly, is, first of all, we both care. Second of all, there's no turf. There's tons of work to get done. And it's good leadership. I think that the way that I approach things, and I know Becky does as well, because we work so closely together, is we're not interested in just talking about problems. We're interested in solving them and moving the ball.
Becky, do what you always do so beautifully, like wrap us up. And I'll just say to both you guys, thank you so much. I'm such huge fans of what you're doing and a huge fan, obviously, of C-TAC also.
I appreciate that, Alex. And, I appreciate this opportunity. And in closing, I would just say, I think the one vision that New York State has that I think should be shared and is probably inherent part of anybody in aging services across the nation, or quite frankly, the world, is that if you start at the patient, the person, the customer, the client, however you want to call them, if you start there in a home, in a community, within a family unit, whatever that looks like, traditional, non-traditional, if you start there and you think about exactly what Greg talked about, the value of that population, what they have contributed to our society, what the working caregiver is providing, and then you think about what is the smoothest course for that journey to take. And that journey is going to take many different venues. It's going to take a couple turns. But what way can you support that journey through community-based organization, through facility systems, through acute care systems, through primary care systems? If you start with the model of what you want that to look like for yourself, and you build that in your state, that's success.
With that rewarding roundtable and spotlight videos, we are going to transition to a period of time that we hope will allow you the chance to engage with our sponsors, connect with other individuals who are in attendance, and to take a well-deserved break. Of special interest will be the discussion rooms we've set up with our friends at Reimagine and their partners, Holistic Underground. They have created an intriguing way of approaching justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in our lives and in our work. Make sure you join them. We will be back with you at 4 p.m. Eastern Time to continue to challenge, enlighten, and encourage. Please join us. I'm Dr. Varnik Trivedi.